Dan. Appreciate that. We're going to talk about the Rural Co-working and Innovation Center grant as administered by the Office of Rural Development here at GOED. And this is a new program as of this past session's legislation. So we call it the RCIC, Rural Co-working and Innovation Center Grant Program. The purpose of the grant is to assist in the creation of individuals working within designated rural areas with infrastructure and equipment to participate in the online workforce. There is a $500,000 appropriation this year. It's an ongoing appropriation, meaning we expect to see the same thing come through in the coming years as well. So the qualifying activities for this grant are as follows: the construction or renovation of a facility to create a co-working and innovation center. It also allows the applicant to extend and or improve utilities and broadband service connections to a co-working and innovation center, and or purchasing equipment, furniture, and security systems as part of the co-working and innovation centers. So that's the purpose of the grant, and these are the qualifying activities. Truly the intention is to establish places where those with skill levels that can work remotely from rural communities to do so. Who qualifies for the grant? Those who qualify are counties, cities, institutions of higher education, or a private company within a defined county designated as a rural area. And those rural areas that qualify are listed here: Beaver, Box Elder, Carbon, Daggett, Duchesne, Emery, Garfield, Grand, Iron, Juab, Kane, Millard, Morgan, Paiute, Rich, San Juan, San Pete, Sevier, Uinta, Wasatch, and Wayne. The counties that do not qualify are Cache, Davis, Salt Lake, Summit, Tooele, Utah, and Washington and Weber counties in this case. So if you are in one of those qualifying counties, or a city within those counties, or an institution of higher education within those qualifying counties, or even a private company, you may apply for this grant. There are some fixed criteria that go along with this grant and its application. The grant will only be awarded to applicants who agree to provide any combination of funds, land, buildings, or in-kind work in the amount equal to at least 25% of the grant. Essentially what that means is that will be considered a matching contribution to the build out of such a facility or the accommodation in any way, such as the extension of utilities or purchasing equipment and security systems, to the contribution of the build out of such a facility. I do have, and I will point out to you in the instruction sheet, an example or two that might help us understand that, but we're going to essentially call that a matching contribution for our sake today. Also, the applicant would need to agree not to use the grant money for ongoing operation or maintenance of the co-working and innovation center. So this isn't a fund for maintenance. This is a fund for creation of such a space or a center. The applications will be open on July 1. This is funding that is appropriate on the fiscal year, which begins July 1 of this year. And the closing date for the application will be September 1. So the application cycle will be open for 2 months. The terms of a grant, if awarded, is for 18 months. The applicant, if awarded a grant, will have 18 months to complete a project. And within that 18 months, if it is completed, then they can come back and seek reimbursement for their expenditures. There will be an online application. I will point that out here in just a few minutes after we run through the rest of the PowerPoint here. In the application, there will be several components that will need to be met, and supporting documentation and so forth. Highlights, of course, would be that we would need to see an entity's history and their qualification. We expect that applicants will be such that they will be professionals in something of this space, or the management and maintenance of some kind of a center or a facility such as this. We would like to see that qualification. Also, project proposals, in other words, your design and how it's going to be happen, the scope of work and how things are going to be done, what your budget and your timelines will be, and ultimately your deliverables. What is the project going to look like when it's all completed? I have a note here that private companies will have additional requirements within the application, and I will point that out once we pull up the application itself. An application must receive a score of 75 or greater to be considered for an award. We're looking for the quality of applications, especially focused on an entity's history and qualification and what they propose to do, and the likelihood of the applicant to perform and actually open one of these centers and get it operational. So every application that we will receive will be scored, and we're looking for the best applicants that are the best qualified, that will deliver the best product. There are some priorities given to those who are reviewed. Applications that are reviewed, we'll be looking at these three things here. The priorities will be given to applicants who will serve underprivileged or underserved communities, including communities with high unemployment and or low median incomes compared to the state average. Priority will be given to an applicant where an applicant demonstrates comprehensive planning of a project but has limited access to financial resources, including financial resources from local or county government. And a priority would be given to an applicant that maximizes economic development opportunities in collaboration with the economic development needs or plans of an educational institute, a county, or a municipality. So with that third one, we would highly consider those who believe that a rural co-working and innovation center would be would fit within their economic development needs and plans.
James, may I interrupt you with a question?
Yes, please.
So someone asked, would a library count if they wanted to apply for this grant?
So long as they are connected to a county, a city, or an institution of higher learning, yes.
Thank you.
Along with this new legislation that creates the co-working and innovation center grant, an advisory committee is being formed, and now this is done by statute. So the committee will be called the Rural Online Working Hubs Grant Advisory Committee. They will form to review and advise over the applications, and ultimately will give recommendations toward the awarding of these grants. So as we speak, we are attempting to form that board. There are statutory requirements there. Certain organizations must be represented on this committee. And so we are diligently going about forming that committee right now, and it'll be in place for that July 1 launch of our applications. Let me allow Nan here for a few minutes to introduce the Permanent Community Impact Fund CIB option or opportunity that may be connected with this this opportunity as well.
So many of you that work with cities or counties are aware of the CIB funding mechanism that is available, I believe, to all areas of the state. Our contact is Candace Powers, and Candace has offered her availability after the session or whenever via phone or email to answer questions that organizations that are eligible for CIB funds, if they would like to look at partnering with CIB on one of these RCIC grants. So you see her contact information there. Please don't hesitate to reach out to Candace directly if, again, your organization is eligible for CIB funding.
Thank you, Nan. I'd like to pull onto the screen now the information instructions sheet that we have that coincides with this grant. Anybody who is anticipating putting in an application will need to review this document. It has, as we have introduced already, the grant's purpose, general information and qualifying activities, what rural counties and areas qualify for this grant. And then it begins to introduce the application. So full instructions will be here in this sheet over how to apply, what the expectation of the applicants are, and they're bulleted, pointed, they're numbered so that it can be clearly understood. Now, I introduced the idea that a private company may also apply for this grant. They will have some additional requirements beyond those of a county, city, or institution of higher education, and I introduced those additional requirements here with a couple of points. Working cooperatively with the local cities, counties, and regional economic development organizations will be one of those requirements. And number two, when we involve ourselves with real estate, and in this case, we are crossing the lines with real estate and who holds property and so forth. We are asking those who might apply, who are private companies, to retain ownership of the building or maintain a lease agreement on the building in which the co-working and innovation center is housed, and agree by affidavit to not sell it or any of the assets obtained as a part of this grant for a period of 2 years after qualifying. The qualifying project activities are completed and reimbursement has been made.
James,
there are some various reasons for that, but yes, I might have a question.
Sorry, just a quick note to reiterate. The CIB will provide funding to a city, county, or town primarily to provide infrastructure and planning. The applicant must be a political body. The CIB cannot fund private entities.
Right. So in this case, there wouldn't be an opportunity to pair with the CIB fund in the event that an applicant is a private company. That's correct. Thank you for clarifying that. Further along in the information instruction sheets, the list of priorities are given. We've gone over that in the PowerPoint. It's reiterated here. We're really truly looking for the applicant to justify the need for the grant and the dollar amount in which they are requesting. Now, we have a $500,000, $500,000. We do not know how many applications we will receive, but that is the limit to the fund this year. So we will be looking as reviewers of these applications and as the committee, Rural Online Working Hub Committee, reviews these things, these are the criteria that they'll be looking at. Does the applicant meet these priorities, number one, and is there a justifiable need for this grant and the dollar amount that they're requesting? Again, a mention of the fixed criteria, the 25% of the grant that needs to be a matching contribution. And I mentioned that there would be some examples. I've gotten 3 examples here in the instruction sheet that might help to clarify what that means. And so if you have questions about it, please make sure that you obtain a copy of the information instruction sheet and review these requirements for the 25% matching portion of the grant. Mentioned the application scoring, and when I bring up the application, you'll see what I mean. The applications will be scored and then reviewed by the Rural Online Working Hubs Advisory Committee, and they will then make recommendations for final allocation of funding. We mentioned that an application must receive a score of not less than 75 to be considered. The points are as follows. 5 points for your standard organizational information, tax ID numbers, who will be represented, emails and contacts and so forth. 10 points for supporting documentation. We are looking for lists of stakeholders, supporting letters, letters of support, I should say, evaluation documents that support the idea of your 25% matching contribution, bids and quotes on your design or your project that you anticipate building, and so forth. There will be some additional requirements for organizations who might be private companies, and those are listed here. Just further information that is different than what is typically required of a public organization. 5 points for your history and qualifications, 20 points for your proposal. Your proposal is going to explain what you anticipate doing. 20 points for your scope of work is essentially an explanation of how you're going to do this project. So we've got a what and we've got a how. Each one of those is worth 20 points. Your qualifying activities again are listed. So if we're going to look at somebody's scope of work, we're going to be looking at these 3 parameters to see that you meet them, and we'll score you accordingly. There's going to be 10 points there that will potentially be given to the applicant that budgets out in an itemized form. We're looking for that, an itemized form that reflect your project proposal, your scope of work, and your deliverables. We'd like to see that your estimates are realistic for the build out or accommodation of one of these centers. Your budget will also need to include your matching funds. I've got a sample budget here. It's very, very rudimentary. Anticipated be that an applicant's budget would be much more comprehensive than this, but this kind of gives you a layout of the minimum information that we'd be looking for. Finally, we'd give 10 points for a timeline. You have 18 months to perform. If it's not complete in 18 months, we can't reimburse you. But a timeline will help you plan as an applicant, and we anticipate that you would list benchmarks over the period of build out or accommodation of one of these centers. Ultimately, finally, we would give you 20 points or up to 20 points as you give us a synopsis or a summary of all of these things that then indicate to us what your deliverables and outcomes will be. In other words, what will the project look like upon completion? And all of these things, the scope of work, your proposal, your budget, your deliverable and outcomes, will be listed in your contract. If you are ultimately awarded a grant, we'll draw up a contract. These elements that you put in each one of these categories will be included in the contract so that our compliance department can see that you've actually performed. At the bottom here, we talk about that, your reimbursement. In this case, slightly different than what we've done with our other past, our other post-performance grants, in that in the past you will have had to complete the project 100% in order to get any form of reimbursement. In this case, we anticipate that costs may accumulate over time, and that these centers will take time to develop. So, and in that case, over the period of your 18 months, we would reimburse up to 50% of your expenses incurred during the development of the project. Then, upon final completion of the project, and we see that it is completed, you've received a occupancy permit and all of those things, then you would seek for reimbursement of the remaining 50% of the costs that you incur. And there's an explanation then in the instruction sheet of what will be required of in order to seek reimbursement. I won't go into details of those, but there will be, in conjunction with these, another form in which you can come in and make a reimbursement request. That form has not been developed yet, but it will include these elements here. Now, I'd like to quickly pull over to the screen the application itself. So let me just go into preview mode here. If you were to pull up an application, it will look like this. Your instructions, general information, and qualifying activities and places are on the front page. You essentially will be required to mark that you've read the information and instruction sheet that I've just introduced to you, and that you're familiar with it as you proceed into the next portion of the application. So if you do that, you end up going to page 2 of the application. It will ask you this question: who are you, basically? Are you a county, city, or an institution of higher learning, or are you a private company? Because we do have some extra requirements for a private company. They would click on that box and see other fields that this other one wouldn't see. So if we were to click on county, city, then you will see all the required fields. You also see a note that this is worth 5 points in your application. There's fields for you to upload required documents and inform us as to primary contacts and secondary contacts, so forth. If we were to click on private company, then we would also, it would populate with different and more requirements that pertain to a private organization there, so you can see that. And as we go into the page 3, all your supporting documents worth 10 points. They're self-explanatory, they're all required fields. So if we say here that we need a list of stakeholders and partners for this grant and their roles, then you would upload such a list. If you have letters of support, you can add them here, and we also have a field here which allows you to enter more than one. So enter as many as you need to obtain, and you have space in order to make those uploads. And so on and so forth. We've got quotes and bids that we anticipate receiving. If you have drafts or renderings of your anticipated project, we would want to see that as well. Questions about your match would be down there. Then on page 4, we get into history, project design, scope of work, and deliverables. And I see that I've got to change these point values to match the sheet. And I apologize, I will do that before it opens on July 1. We want you to enter your information in these fields. We do not want you to upload other documents to answer these questions. So you have 1,000-word space here to answer the questions. We would like to see your answers in the application rather than as a separate document. Finally, your budget, and you will have an upload for that budget, but a slight explanation you'd put in there, 300 words or so in there. And same thing with timeline, a short explanation of your timeline, and then the requirement to upload an Excel file that shows us what your timeline is going to be. Finally, you would end up telling us how much you need based on your budget and your proposed project. This is a dollar amount that you're going to put in here, whatever it might be. So long as it's justifiable against your application, it will be considered. You'll make your acknowledgments and submit your application. So that's a review of the application. Again, it will be open on July 1. It will be open through until September 1st, 2-month period of time for qualified applicants to make their applications. After which we will collect them, review them, and get them through the board, the Hub's committee, and have their recommendations come forward as well. So that's an introduction to the application itself. Finally, for those who are looking for these things, please go to business.utah.gov, click on programs, go to rural development, and under these tabs, you will find, and in this case, we are looking for Rural Co-working and Innovation Centered Grant Program. Open up that tab, and you will find links. Here's the link to the information and instruction page. Here's the link to the application. And what you will also find after we complete this webinar today, a link to this webinar so that you may review it for instruction, and a link to a one-pager, which is going to be a synopsis or a short version of an introduction to this program. So this is where you find the links. This is where you end up going to the application and the information page. We're also willing to send those things out to you, those links to you through an email contact. If you have questions, you'd like to direct them to me or to our department, please send them our way, and we'll also make sure that as we reply, we'll send these links to you as well. Nan, I'd be happy to entertain any other questions.
Great. So let's give everybody a brief opportunity to ask those questions in the chat box. In the meantime, James, thank you for updating the group on progress on the website. It is a work in progress, but we will do our very best to have those 2 additional links completed and posted up next week. So I'm not seeing any additional questions. Going once, going twice. Well, James, you did such a great job that no one has any current questions.
Oh, looks like one came through.
Let's see. Oh, okay. Could a 501c3 apply as a private company, or does it need to be for profit?
That is a good question, and I honestly don't have a clear answer on that. I will have to go to Dane as a part of our rules making to see if that's determined as such or not. So far as I understand it, and so far as I've read the statute, I would anticipate that the answer is no. We do have the option for cities, counties, and institutions of higher learning, because they are all nonprofits in their own form, but a 501c3 is different. So I can't say I have clarity on that yet. I would be happy to find out and send out an email to our questionnaire there.
Great, thank you. Another question has come through. Once the application is opened, can it remain in partially completed status to continue to be worked on?
Yes, yes. It is formatted such that you would be able to come and go out of that until you're ready to submit it.
Thank you. And another, can the acquisition of real estate or raw land be an eligible part of the grant?
No, we're looking for existing buildings or a building to be built on existing property. You can build a whole building, yes, but to buy the raw land, this does not anticipate this. This is for the building of such a facility and for accommodating the infrastructure and the internal workings of the facility, not to buy the land that it might be built on.
Great. Let me just work through these to see if we've answered everyone's questions. And it looks like we may have done so. Great. Any last minute questions, folks?
Well, thank you. Appreciate those who have tuned in, and we will also, this is being recorded so that it will be uploaded for review on the website as mentioned previously.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, James.